Welcome to a new kind of truth. This podcast will broadcast a new gospel that will feel like church, where the pews are filled with the hues of the human condition. Folks searching for something, because we all going through a similar kind of something, all of us looking for a message, so no need to sit in the back. Come to the front, learn a lesson, get a blessing. You probably came to be entertained or hear the choir sing, but you're about to feel the thoughts of a purpose-driven woman. No sugarcoating, all truth, straight, no chaser. Here to get down to the heart of the matter, so be prepared to peel back the layers. Pour your wine, open up your mind, and let's unwind to the rantings of Dani.
All right. So welcome back. We are here for the 7th and final episode on racism in America. If you guys have been tuning into this podcast, it has been a really, really interesting conversation. Throughout this journey, I've gotten a chance to interview my mom. I got a chance to talk to her about what it was like to fall in love and marry a black man in the early 60s, raise 3 biracial children in the hills of Northeast Tennessee in the early 70s and 80s, and really just have a look at what's happening in our country today, what's happening in politics, what's happening in our communities, what's happening in our prison systems and our justice systems, what's happening even within our own families. And it's been a really, really good conversation. I have to give some shout outs and some thank yous to my friend Jennifer, who let me interview her. We went to high school together, and getting her take on racism and what it was like to be raised in an environment where there was a lot of negativity towards blacks and a lot of different things being said, and what made her choose to view people differently. So it's been a great journey. If you have not listened to all the other episodes, I encourage you to do that so you know what this conversation has been about. And you can find the podcast on iTunes, on Google Play, SoundCloud, YouTube, Spreaker, so forth and so on. It's The Rantings of Dani. You can follow it on Facebook at The Rantings of Dani. You can email me. I'm Dani, and at therantingsofdani.com. So now that I've got all the formality out of the way, let's just go ahead and dig right in. I want to give you a recap of what I have discovered and found and kind of been able to take away from this entire process. And the first thing I don't think is a surprise to too many people. What I will say is, just like most things in life, family hurts the worst. So if you listen to the last episode of the podcast, it was just put up a couple of days ago, and I talked about going home for my family reunion on my mom's side of the family. And my mom is white, right? And my dad was black. And my dad passed away when I was 6 months old. So my mom had a really tough job of raising 3 biracial children in Northeast Tennessee, on her own. And she became a widow at 28. Like, holy geez, at 28. And, so things that I thought was just her being my mom. My mom was really, really heavy on us, how we behaved outside the home and making sure that we were articulate, that we pronounced our words and we had a good vocabulary and all that kind of stuff, which back then was like, holy geez, like, do you have to be so flippin' extreme? But now, during this process, what I heard her tell me was that when my dad was sick and they knew he was going to pass, they would have conversations about how he wanted his children to be raised. And he made my mom promise not to let my brothers and I grow up to be hoodlums or to be thugs. And he wanted us to be able to have every advantage possible, because he knew we were going to be looked at because of the color of our skin. So when we opened our mouth, he wanted us to be able to prove people wrong, if that makes sense. So I look at that now, and I listen to my mom talk about what it was like to bring my dad home, and what it's like for me when I go home for family reunions, or to have certain members of my family not talk to me now because of our disagreement when it comes to Black Lives Matter and the racial tension in this country, or the way that some police officers and a lot of folks in positions of authority treat people of color. And that's been the most yucky part of it all, I guess, if you will, because you would hope that when it comes to family, that should be the one place where you're safe. And oftentimes it tends not to be. And I don't even know that it's malicious. Matter of fact, I can tell you that within my family, it's not malicious most of the time. It comes from a place of ignorance. And then as soon as I say that, I have like a battle with myself, because I don't know, how long do you get to be ignorant? How long do you get to choose not to know At what point is it your responsibility to find out? At what point is it your responsibility to dig deeper, to ask the questions, to want to know how other people feel and what their experience is like and what that journey is like, right? I was chatting with one of my good friends, Ebony, today, and she said it was good to hear, I think she heard like the first episode, which is how much melanin is okay, where I talk about not being black enough for blacks, not being white enough for whites. And she said, it was really good to hear you. She said, and hear the perspective from a biracial woman. She said, because I don't know that struggle. So it's funny that even within the race, which brings me to hurt number 2, family, I think, is hurt number 1 when it comes to racism. And number 2, it's the second hurt is hurt where you think you're supposed to belong, if you will, right? Growing up for me, I expected to experience racism from the whites in our community and in my neighborhood because after all, I had a little bit of tint to my skin, so that was expected. I think the greatest hurts occurred and linger from what you experience from blacks, the assumptions, the judgments, the mockery, the things that get said because you're light skinned. And because my mom was so hell bent on making sure that we spoke well, not only was I light skinned, but I talk white, right? So that would be like the second piece of this. And I don't know, like a part of me wants to be like all woo woo and hippie and airy fairy and just say, good God, there's going to be a point where we can just look past color. I just don't know that that's true. I don't know if human nature is going to allow us to get to that point. I think even if we see past the color, we'll still always see the color, which is kind of sad. It's kind of sad and at the same time realistic, if that makes sense. I think people that I love, no matter what shade they are, I'm still going to see that shade in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? And I think that that's just the way that we are. I think that's human condition. I think that's just the way that it's going to be. And part of me goes, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And I know that it doesn't. But we have to get everybody to agree that it doesn't, The third piece of this, if you remember like the third episode or so in this process, I talked about the role that racism is playing in politics in America right now. And we have, you'll have to go back, I don't have all the stats in front of me right now, but we have between 8 and 17 white supremacists, where they're either openly a part of the white supremacist groups or they have strong affiliations and are accepting campaign donations and things like that and being supported by white supremacists and white nationalists. And they're currently running for, and in many cases, winning office. And that's a problem. Like, that's a severe problem. And if we don't wake up to that and become very, very smart in the way that we operate, in the way that we deal with that, we're going to have problems. If you all think that Trump is the problem it goes way deeper than that. You have to start looking at your local levels. You have to start looking at your district attorneys. You have to start looking at the folks who are, the backbone of the Republican Party in some cases. You have to start to really kind of look at those things and be aware. Again, if you don't know, it's your responsibility to find out. That's a big issue that we have right now. I don't think that someone who has those sorts of affiliations should be allowed to run for office. I think that there should be regulations in place and rules in place that prevent that from happening, because I'm not saying that you can't be racist. I'm not saying that at all, because you have the right to feel how you feel, act how you act, believe how you believe, until it infringes upon my rights as an American citizen. Got me? So what that means is, you can dislike blacks all you want. You can march down the street with hoodies and burning crosses all you want. Don't come in my yard, and don't be in a position of authority where you get to decide what's in my best interest, because there's no way that you can do that from an impartial position. There's no way that you can decide what's best for me if you believe that I'm inferior to you or that I don't deserve the same privileges and the same rights as you. So that's the place where I think that we have to have something in place. For goodness sake, if you have to be a certain age to be president, if you could only do certain things, you know what I mean? How can this be not part of the validation process? How does this not become a prerequisite? You know what I mean? And these folks are blatantly doing it. And they are openly saying, so in case you've missed this, they're openly saying that the goal is to infiltrate the political system. And they believe even though it will take time, they will win and they will be successful in their endeavor. And so let me just tell y'all, like, if I'm just being brutally transparent right now, the black woman amigos, that's the damn problem. They've always been more patient than we have. Like, just saying, the black woman amigos, they will plot, they will plan, and they will stick to it until they see it through. And that's something that we haven't been. And see, and I hate this because I'm saying we and them. This is part of the freaking conversation. And after 7 episodes, this is still the dilemma, which is so nuts and so crazy because I don't want there to be an us and a them. So how do you change that's the reality that you live in? How do you successfully navigate wanting to create a new reality and still successfully maneuver the one that you're currently living in? How do you do that? Because I don't have the answer. You know what I mean? For me, it's very, very difficult to be able to navigate this the right way. So just a little bit ago, maybe a week or two ago, I had put up a Facebook status. I am usually the person that can navigate racism and all of those things between like my white friends who have questions and maybe even like stuff that I see on Facebook, and I have black friends that get mad. I'm usually the person that can be the voice of reason and kind of, shed a little light and all of that, whatever. I put my coach hat on and try to bridge the gap, right? That's normally what I can do. And some days it's hard to do that. Some days it's very challenging to do that. I had woken up one day a couple weeks ago, and seen so much racist stuff on my timeline. One was from a white business associate. Another one was from another white person. I'd seen so much of it. And so I had put up a Facebook status that said, "Dear white friends, today is not the day. Sincerely, the most understanding black friend you could ever have." And I meant that, like, sincerely. I don't have any for you today. And what I've learned in this life is that I don't give if I don't have it to give. So if I'm tired, if I'm run down, if I don't have the energy, if I don't have the patience, if I don't have it, and some days I'm just don't, then I'm not good. Then I'm going to let you know, I'm going to set that boundary. Today's not the day. I can't help you. I can't explain it for you. I can't be the voice of reason today. And you're just going to have to understand, because today I'm tired of seeing black people die, or today I'm tired of seeing white racist stuff. Today I'm tired of whatever. And that's just me being human. You know what I mean? So I had put up this status and said that. And a white acquaintance of mine, that she's a Facebook friend and she's an acquaintance of mine. We've taken some courses together. She's a sweetheart and I love her to death. But she commented on my status and said that if I don't want racism to exist, then I need to take my racist post down. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What? And I said, first of all, it wasn't a racist post. Like, I just said, "Dear white people," which meant I was talking to white people. And actually I said, "Dear white friends." And I said, so my friends knew I was talking to them. Like my white friends knew not to comment, because my white friends knew that today wasn't the day. The fact that you commented tells me two things. A, we're not friends. We're just Facebook friends. And B, you don't really know that today's not the day, you know? And it was another moment where she didn't get what I was saying. And I was like, me saying that is not being racist. I didn't say anything derogatory about my white friends. I didn't say anything whatever. But you have to understand that as part of this conversation, the reality is that minorities are going to be frustrated. And no matter how much you want to love, and no matter how much you want to forgive, and no matter how much you want cohesiveness and for us all to get along and for us to come from a place of loving kindness, there are going to be days that it's just a lot. It's a lot every day to wake up in this country and see what we see. It just is. So, there has to be some grace on every side of this conversation. And there's more than just two sides. There's lots of sides to this conversation, you know? And as a biracial woman, I find myself getting pulled back and forth between all kinds of different sides. And it's crazy because I've even had black friends of mine. So I'll give you an example. I was doing a back when there was not Periscope. What was the other one? Anyway, I can't remember right now. It was another platform, and we were doing this discussion on, on race. And there was a guy that was on with me, and he was talking. He's a 6'3", like 200 and some pound black guy, but literally a gentle giant, right? And he was talking to me, and he broke down in tears, and he said that it would sadden him because he would be walking down the street. And he immediately, white women would move over to the side of the sidewalk as if they were scared of him. And it truly hurt his feelings as a human being. He was like, they don't know me. And I asked him, and I said, well, what do you do when they do that? And he said, I just usually look away and walk on past. And I said, well, have you ever tried looking at them and smiling? And he said, no. And I said, well, maybe try looking at them and smiling and saying hi. And he said, wait, so you want me to be nice to people? You want me to be nice to them when they're showing obvious prejudice? And I said, absolutely, if you want them to change. And I know that that's a tough pill to swallow. Why? And he was like, why do I have to be the bigger person? I said, well, if you're not, who's ever going to get the point? Like, here's the thing. We have to understand that to some degree, this is conditioned. In some degree, this is what we're taught. This is what we're learned. I mean, in all degrees, that's true. But I'm talking about what you see in current behavior. Sometimes you ever just do something and it's instinctive and it's not even like you don't even know that you're doing it. I don't even know sometimes that people realize that they're doing that subconscious thing, because truth be told, if I go out my door right now, I get in the elevator in my building, right? Inevitably, what happens when somebody gets on the elevator? We don't look at each other. We look the other way, right? We kind of cower away from each other. Human beings are more disconnected now than we have ever been. And I think there's that on top of all this other conditioning that takes place. And the thing is simply this. Over time, and it may not be in my lifetime or his lifetime, right? But over time, if enough big black men that they walk by the sidewalk, look at them and smile and just say, hey, how you doing? Have a nice day. And keep it pushing, they'll start to be conditioned to something different. Is it fair that that's what you should have to do? Is it fair? Because first of all, you don't have to do it, right? You don't have to. Is it fair that might be what's necessary? No, it's not. At the same time, I think the question that I continue to ask people is, do you want to be heard? Do you want to be right? Do you want to be understood? Or do you want to make change occur? And I think that if you go past being heard and past being right, it takes some giving. It takes some extra oomph, some extra emphasis, some taking down of your pride and taking down of your ego in order to build bridges. And you might say, well, I don't want to build bridges and I don't want to whatever. Really? Because what do you want then? What do you want? Do you want to flip the table? Because that's just the same thing happening on the other side of the fence. Like, do we really want to fix the problem is the question, And sometimes I don't know that people do. I think that if the problem was fixed, if the issue was fixed, people would have to take responsibility for what they do or don't do in their own lives. You might have to actually be responsible for the way that you handle life and the way that you choose to live and the way that you conduct yourself. And some people like their hate speech, and some people like what they have to say. And I think that comes from a place of being hurt. What I find is that anger usually comes as a cover-up for hurt or fear. That's what I usually find, and that's on every side of this conversation. What you have happening right now is a lot of rhetoric, and this is where the media comes into play. You have a lot of rhetoric that fuels this conversation, and sometimes not the best way. A lot of times not the best way. So there's a lot of talk right now about the the white race being in jeopardy, and about about minorities taking over and that bloodline, becoming non-existent. And the way that verbiage is spewed is in such a way to generate fear. And, there's this thought in the back of a lot of heads that says, oh my God, what happens if minorities actually do take over? And then all of a sudden they're in a position, people of color, of all colors, are in a position to do to us what's been done to them. Fear, 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 fear. Guys, let me just say this, and I mean this with every fiber of my being. What I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is nothing good comes from fear. Nothing good comes from fear. Nothing. And, you might say, well, that's karma and that's what they get and whatever. I can't afford to have that outlook, and I'll tell you why. My grandkids are intercontinental babies. My grandkids have African American in them. They have white in them. They have good gosh, El Salvadorian. They have Honduran. They have Mexican. They have Arabic. Like, there's a bunch of stuff in my babies, right? And I want a world where they can live and love freely. I want a world where I know, and this is when I get a little emotional, because I want a world where I know they're going to be okay. And we don't have that right now. We do not have a world where I know my grandkids are going to be okay. And that should motivate us. That should strike something in us to make us want to do something, to make us want to change something. And I don't see that happening. It's like people don't get past the moment. People don't get past their pride. People don't get past the bullshit, to be quite honest, of this crap you see everywhere. It is about more than the likes on your Facebook page. It's about more than the video views that you get. It's about more than, how many people share your meme. We are dealing with our lives and the lives of our kids and our grandkids. Like, if nobody else wakes up and gets this, what are we going to do? Like, that's the thing that really gets me on this. I don't want there to be I got to tell my black baby boys that they have to be, on their guard 24/7, all that stuff. I don't want to have to tell, I just don't, you know what I mean? I don't want anything remotely close to my experience to be what my grandkids experience. And we're in a world right now that I'm not sure that it's not going to be worse. And that's scary, People who look at this conversation as something that is cynical. People who look at this conversation as something that is funny or minute. You're missing it, folks. You're missing it. And this is the thing that gets me, right? We've all got people in our lives. We all have people in our lives that have gotten us to see past our prejudices. You've met somebody that made you think differently than you used to. You've seen somebody, you've gotten a glimpse of somebody else's heart and somebody else's spirit, and it's made you see differently. And here's my point. That is what's possible across the board, right? It doesn't mean that you don't see the color at all. It just means you get beyond it. It means you get past it. And we have to be real careful of the rhetoric that we spew every day. I even talk about the fact that people call Trump 45 and orange. Well, here's a wake-up call for you. That language is dangerous. And I'm going to tell you why it's dangerous. It is not human nature to treat each other this way. Slavery, abuse, murder, rape, it's not normal. It's not the way that we're built. Do y'all understand that? It's not the way that we're designed. It's not the way that we're created. It goes against everything in our fiber. So in order to do it, we have to dehumanize each other. And you see that in slavery. They literally said that we were 3/4 of a human being, right? You see it in slavery where they, you have to be less than, you have to be an animal, you have to be whatever. You get that, right? So when you call Trump 45 or orange, well, that's a number and a color. So what we know is numbers and colors don't have emotions. They don't have spirits. They don't have souls. You don't think about a number having children or a wife or any of that human component, right? So no matter what you think of what kind of human he is, he's still a human being, right? No matter what you might think, what kind of human being he still is one. And it's not so much about what he is or what he isn't. It's about you and the language that you use, that you refer. Because if you are in the practice of dehumanizing another person, that's dangerous territory to get into. It's real. It excuses what we say and do to each other at that point. When you see someone as non-human, any behavior, anything you do to them becomes acceptable. Does that make sense? And that's another part of the issue, right? So like when we get into this thing, it sounds easy when we talk about, all races need to stop this. First, there's only one race, right? It's the human race. We have lots of different ethnicities, lots of different cultures, lots of different backgrounds. We have lots of different but there's only one race, and it's the human race, right? My personal belief is that the lesson that we're all here to learn is love. Now, some people might be, oh, well, Dani, that's just so hippie-ish. I don't give a shit. That's what I believe. And I believe that's why you see, whenever you got to learn a lesson, right? Whenever you want to get to the next place in life, what comes up for you? What gets presented to you is the very thing that you need to overcome to get there, right? So, if you say, I want a world where there are no prejudices, where there's no racism, guess what's going to happen? Everything in your life that you have prejudice against, everything in your life that you have preconceived notions and discriminations and racist tendencies, it's going to show up for you. And it's your job to address it. It's your job to own it, I've said in this process, I'm biracial, and I swear on everything. I still feel some kind of way sometimes when I see, and it's not for a long time, it's just for like a second, but I'll see like a fine black man with a white woman, with my white mama now, remember y'all, with my white mama, and for half a second I'll be like, damn. Because how was I conditioned? I was conditioned that everybody's taking our good black men. And it takes me like half a second to go, what is wrong with you? Love is love. Love is love, and love is okay. But for half a second, I have to catch my human tendency. But see, this is part of it, right? What if we just all could own our own stuff? What if we could just say, this is what it is? And you know what? How crazy is it that pops up for me? But that's the reality of it, right? But the more that we can own it, the more that we can address it, the more that we don't hide it, right? The more we'll overcome it, and we'll be able to get past it, and we'll be able to kind of build some bridges. I think the part that is concerning for me, really especially, and it kind of leads into the next series that I'm going to be doing on the podcast, is the role that religion plays in this. Okay, I've been studying this whole racism thing for a good minute now, and a lot of times, and I would say the majority of the time that I see racist rhetoric, especially on social media, what I also see right behind it is that person's claim to be a part of a particular religion, usually Christianity. I see a lot of that. And same thing when I look at politics and the stuff that we see happening in the Republican Party. You see a lot of preaching and talking about morals and values and character, but those morals and values and character don't apply in every situation and on every level, right? And so when I start to see these things happening, when I see preachers like Paula White saying that she's Donald Trump's, God whisperer or advisor, we have to have a conversation. Because just because you hold the position or title of pastor or preacher or whatever doesn't mean A, that you hear from God any better than I do, or B, that you are above accountability, And that's something that we just have to call it out on the table, call a thing, and address what is. And we have to get to a place where you don't get to hide behind your religion and that give you a pass. Religion is not a pass for racism. Religion is not a pass for hate speech. Religion is not a pass for you to say anything that you want to say. Not against racism, not against homosexuality, not against LGBTQ, none of that stuff. Your religious practice is yours. I get it. You're entitled to it. right up until the time that it infringes upon the right of someone else. And I keep saying that, and I'm going to keep saying it until people get it, right? You have the right to think, believe, and say and feel everything you want right up until the time that it infringes upon the rights of someone else. That especially includes you being in a public office. That especially includes that, because now you're making decisions that concern my well-being and the well-being of people that I love. And you cannot do that if you are outspokenly diminishing and devaluing and discriminating against those people in your speech. So, having said that, I'm wrapping up racism. This was the recap of the previous 6 or 7 episodes about racism in America. And what I will be starting is the religion segment. It'll be a series, and it will probably be anywhere from 5 to 7 episodes. And those will start this week as well. So if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, guys, please do that for me. It's available on Google Play. It's available on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker. It will be on Spotify when we get out of the backlog that they have. And it's called The Rantings of Dani, right? I'm Dani. There's a Facebook page called The Rantings of Dani as well. Like the page, subscribe. I post stuff there. And email me. I don't want to have these conversations by myself. It's not just about what I think. I want you to share with me what you think. What do you feel? What are your experiences? What do you see from where you are? I'm not you, right? So you have a totally different vantage point of what's happening than what I see. And what helps us gain understanding, what helps us build empathy and bridges with each other is to be able to have this conversation and have it respectfully. Even if at the end of the day, all we can do is agree to disagree. At least we can do it from a place of love, you know what I mean? And openness. Like that at the end of the day is the least that I hope for out of the podcast. So I appreciate you all for tuning in and listening. For those of you guys, I did this as a joint Facebook Live and podcast recording. So for those of you guys who are on Facebook Live, if you'll give me just a second, I'm going to do the outro and then we'll get back to this conversation. For those of you guys who are listening on the podcast, I seriously do appreciate you. We will be tuning in again with some more episodes coming up. Y'all know how I end this thing, right? Be amazing, be light, and be love.